My father-in-law slid a check across the table. $100,000. His handwriting was neat, deliberate, like he'd practiced writing this amount. The paper was crisp, new. He'd probably gotten it from the bank that morning, wanted it to look official. "Leave my son and never come back," he said. "This is more money than you'll ever see in your life. Take it. Disappear. Everyone wins." I looked at that check, at his smug face, at the restaurant around us, upscale and quiet, white tablecloths and hushed conversations, the kind of place where people make deals they don't want witnesses for. He'd chosen this location carefully, public enough that I couldn't make a scene, private enough that no one would hear the details. I picked up the check, folded it once, slowly, watching his eyes follow the movement, and walked across the restaurant to where my husband Garrett was waiting at the bar, completely unaware of what his father had just tried to do. I handed him the check without a word. He unfolded it. Read the amount. Read the memo line that said, "Final payment." His face went through confusion, then understanding, then something cold and hard that I'd never seen before in 3 years of marriage. He stood up, walked back to his father's table, and I followed. Richard was already smiling, assuming victory. Garrett set the check down in front of him. "Thanks for the down payment on our new house," he said. "Don't contact us again." His father's jaw dropped. For 3 years, Richard had been trying to end our marriage. In 30 seconds, Garrett ended their relationship instead. And that was just the beginning of what Richard lost. Let me take you back, because this story isn't about a check or a bribe. It's about a man who spent years trying to prove I wasn't good enough for his family, and how that arrogance cost him everything. His son, his reputation, and eventually, his own father's respect. If you've ever had someone decide you were worthless before they knew your name, if you've ever watched someone try to buy their way out of being wrong, this story is for you. I met Garrett at a community art show when I was 23. I'd just graduated with a degree in graphic design, working at a small marketing agency, making $32,000 a year. He was 25, finishing his master's in civil engineering. We started talking in front of a painting neither of us understood. Some abstract thing with too many colors that looked like a migraine on canvas. 3 hours later, we were still talking at a coffee shop down the street. He asked for my number. I gave it to him before he finished the sentence. Garrett came from money. Old money. His grandfather Robert had built a commercial real estate empire in the 70s, buying up strip malls and office buildings across 3 states. His father Richard had inherited the business and spent 30 years coasting on his father's success. Garrett wanted nothing to do with any of it. Chose engineering specifically because it was as far from real estate as he could get. He wanted to build things that lasted. Bridges, roads, infrastructure that people used without ever knowing who designed it. He liked that anonymity. I didn't know any of this at first. Garrett drove a 10-year-old Honda, lived modestly, wore the same 3 flannels on rotation. Nothing about him screamed wealth. I found out 3 months into dating when he casually mentioned that his grandfather owned the building his apartment was in. I asked how many buildings total. He said he'd stopped counting somewhere around 40. Meeting Richard happened 6 months in. Garrett kept postponing it. "My mom's not around anymore, and my dad is a lot," he'd say. I thought I understood. I had no idea what I was walking into. The house was enormous. 7,000 square feet, paid for with family money, maintained by staff. Richard greeted Garrett with a handshake and warmth. He greeted me with a look that traveled from my pixie haircut to my Target dress, to my knockoff heels, cataloging every way I didn't belong. "So you're the one keeping my son busy," he said. "Not welcome. Just accusation dressed as small talk. Dinner was an interrogation. Where did I grow up? Small town in Ohio? School? State university? Full scholarship? Parents? Mom taught elementary. Dad worked manufacturing before the plant closed. When I mentioned my graphic design career, Richard nodded like I was confirming suspicions. How ambitious. Is there much money in drawing things for advertisements? After dinner, I overheard Richard talking to Garrett in the study. The door was cracked. She's a nice enough girl, Richard said, but you can do better. Someone with real background, real connections. She's a phase, Garrett. Get it out of your system before it becomes a problem. I didn't hear Garrett's response. Just walked to the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. Pixie cut, clearance dress, knockoff heels. I didn't cry. I just got clear. Richard had decided I wasn't good enough before knowing my name. That was a test I could never pass by his rules. So I stopped trying. Garrett found me in the hallway 10 minutes later. He looked upset. I'm sorry, he said. I heard some of it. I told him to back off. Did he listen? He never listens. But I don't care what he thinks. I care about you. I believed him. I just didn't realize how many times that belief would be tested over the next 3 years. We got engaged on my 25th birthday. Garrett proposed at our first date spot, sunset over the river. When he called Richard with the news, I heard the response through the phone. Not congratulations, but we should talk about prenuptial agreements. The prenup negotiation was brutal. Richard's lawyer treated me like a gold digger. 3 years of tax returns, bank statements, credit reports. Clauses that would leave me with nothing if the marriage ended within 5 years. I sat there feeling like a defendant, not a fiancé. Garrett fought every point. We ended with something fair, but the process showed me exactly what Richard thought I was worth. A liability to minimize. The wedding was small. 40 people, garden ceremony. Richard gave a toast that talked for 4 minutes without mentioning me by name. To my son. May he always find his way back to what matters. I smiled through it. We left for our honeymoon and didn't speak to Richard for 6 weeks. Best month and a half of our marriage. Year 1 brought small cruelties. Richard would invite Garrett to events and forget to include me. Comments about my job, my clothes, my haircut, always framed as helpful. Longer hair might soften your face. Is there much money in drawing advertisements? First Christmas, Richard gave Garrett a Rolex, gave me a $50 salon gift card with a note suggesting I try something more feminine. Garrett was furious. I talked him down. He wants a reaction. Don't give him one. I was wrong. Silence read as acceptance. Richard escalated. Year 2, Richard weaponized family events. Birthdays, anniversaries, graduations. He'd forget to tell us the date, or give wrong venue information. We'd find out through Instagram. He was systematically making us look unreliable, building a narrative that I was isolating Garrett from family. What Richard didn't count on was Robert, Garrett's grandfather. 84 years old, sharp as a tack, deeply unimpressed with his own son. Robert had built the empire from nothing. 1 strip mall, 20-hour days, risks that paid off. He'd given Richard every advantage and watched him waste them. I raised a caretaker, Robert told Garrett once. I wanted a builder. Robert liked me from our first meeting, asked about my work, my plans, listened. When Richard started the sabotage, Robert counterattacked, calling us with correct information, publicly contradicting Richard's lies. At one dinner, when Richard claimed we'd missed his sister's party, Robert said loudly, "They missed it because you told them wrong weekend. I have your text." First time I saw real anger break Richard's polished surface. The discovery happened 18 months into our marriage. Garrett was helping Robert organize old files for estate planning. He found records from 20 years ago. Loans Richard had taken from the company. 300,000 here, 250 there. All marked repaid, but repayment records were suspicious. Same amounts cycling to hide what was happening. Garrett brought the records to Robert. The old man looked at them for a long time. I wondered when someone would find those. Richard had been skimming for 2 decades. Not enough to alarm, but enough to fund a lifestyle above his salary. The house, the cars, the country club. None earned. All quietly stolen from his own father. Robert didn't confront Richard. Not yet. Started making quiet changes, restructuring ownership, moving assets into trusts, protecting the company. He told Garrett in confidence, playing a long game. Richard had no idea he was already losing. The trigger came 3 months ago, at Robert's 85th birthday. 50 people. Catered affair at Richard's house. Paid with company money, naturally. I wore a green dress I'd saved months to buy. Richard found me alone near the bathroom. "You look nice," he said. First compliment ever. Something was wrong. "I've been thinking about you and Garrett. His career is taking off. There's a project in Seattle. Major infrastructure. Huge opportunity." "Sounds great." He smiled coldly. "It is, but it's a fresh start. New city. The kind of opportunity that works best without baggage. Baggage. I'm prepared to make your transition easy, very financially easy. Lunch next week. Just us. We'll discuss numbers." I stood there in my green dress listening to my father-in-law offer to pay me to disappear. Not because I'd done anything wrong, just because 3 years ago he'd decided I wasn't enough and never stopped looking for an exit. "I'll think about it," I said. I didn't mean it. I didn't tell Garrett immediately, needed to process. For 2 weeks, I carried that conversation like a weight. Richard texted twice suggesting lunch dates. I didn't respond. Then the restaurant. Richard called Garrett, said he wanted father-son lunch. Suspicious, but Garrett agreed. At the restaurant, Richard said a colleague was coming. Could Garrett wait at the bar? Sure. Then Richard texted me. "Martinelli's. Private booth in back. Final offer." I don't know why I went. Maybe needed proof. Maybe needed to look him in the eye when I said no. Found the private booth. Richard had the check already written. $100,000. Slid it across like a business deal. "This is more money than you'll ever see. Take it. Disappear. Tell Garrett whatever you want. Just be gone by month's end. And if I say no, then I'll make your life uncomfortable. Lawyers who owe me favors. I can make your career disappear. Your credit. Your reputation. Take the money. It's more than you deserve." That's when I picked up the check, walked across the restaurant, handed it to Garrett. His face. Confusion to understanding to rage. He walked back to Richard's booth. I followed. Richard was still smiling. The smile died when he saw Garrett holding the check. "Thanks for the down payment on our new house. Don't contact us again." "Garrett, let me explain. You tried to bribe my wife to leave me. There's nothing to explain. I was protecting you." "She's not right. She's the best thing that ever happened to me, and you're done." Garrett walked out. I followed. Richard called after us. We didn't stop. Got in the car. Drove in the silence. Garrett pulled over after 10 minutes, shaking. I knew he was bad. I didn't know this bad. "You're cutting him off now. That's what matters." He called Robert. The conversation happened 3 days later at Robert's assisted living facility. He listened to everything. The bribery, the threats, the years of cruelty. Then he smiled. "My son tried to buy your wife off. I'm going to buy him out of your lives." He explained what he'd been planning since Garrett found those records. Company restructuring was almost complete. Richard was about to discover he was no longer majority owner. Robert had been moving assets, creating trusts, preparing for exactly this moment. I was going to wait until I died. Let lawyers sort it out. But this is better. Personal. My son tried to destroy your marriage for pride. I'm going to make sure he feels exactly how that betrayal burns. Robert offered us $250,000. No strings. Use it for a house. Somewhere far. Start fresh. Build something. That's what I did at your age. The only thing that matters. Garrett tried to refuse. Robert cut him off. You've been managing around my son for 3 years. Take the money. Get out. When Richard calls crying about unfairness, I want to tell him exactly where that money went. We took it, between Robert's gift and Richard's bribe check. $350,000. Enough for a house in a different state. Far from Richard's influence. The confrontation came 2 weeks later. Richard showed up at our apartment at 7 a.m., pounding on the door. Unshaved, wrinkled clothes, red eyes. You have to talk to your grandfather. He's lost his mind, destroying everything I've built. You didn't build anything, Garrett said. You maintained what he built, badly, while stealing from him. That's complicated. You don't understand. I found the records. 20 years of loans you never repaid. $300,000 from the pension fund. You're lucky he's not pressing charges. Richard's face went pale, then red. Then he turned on me. This is your fault. You poisoned him against me. She didn't do anything, Garrett cut in. You did this years ago. The bribe was last straw. It wasn't a bribe, a settlement. I was being generous. You offered my wife $100,000 to abandon our marriage. That's pathological. She doesn't deserve you, Richard was shouting. She's nobody, comes from nothing. I was trying to save you from a mistake. I stepped forward. First time I'd ever directly confronted him. You decided I was worthless before knowing my name. You spent 3 years trying to prove it. All you proved is that you measure people by bank accounts. By that measure, Richard, you're worthless. You didn't earn anything. You inherited it and stole more. I built my career from nothing, earned my husband's love. I have more actual value than you've ever created. Silence. Richard stared like seeing me for the first time. Get out, Garrett said. Don't call, don't text. You're done being part of our lives. I'm your father. You stopped being my father when you tried to buy my wife like a used car. Richard left. Didn't slam the door. Just walked out looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. That was 3 months ago. He's called 11 times. Garrett hasn't answered once. We moved last month. Portland, Oregon. 3-bedroom house with a yard, neighborhood full of young families. Garrett works for an infrastructure firm doing exactly what he always wanted. I started my own design studio, finally, home office with mountain views. We're building something. Robert visited last week, 85, but he made the trip. Walked through our house nodding approvingly. Told us the latest. Restructuring complete. Richard out as CEO, replaced by a professional manager. Richard's contesting in court, but documents are airtight. Years of fighting. Losing anyway. He'll burn through savings on lawyers, Robert said. End up with exactly what he deserves. Nothing he didn't earn himself, which is nothing. I asked if he felt guilty cutting off his own son. Long pause. I raised him wrong. Gave everything, expected nothing. That's not love. That's negligence. What I'm doing isn't revenge. It's consequences. Should have happened 20 years ago. I keep Richard's check framed in my office. Never cashed. We deposited Robert's gift instead and let the bribe sit there as a reminder. $100,000 memo. Final payment. Not about the money. About the moment Garrett chose me over everything he'd grown up with. Richard said I wasn't good enough. I'm good enough to have his son's complete loyalty. Good enough to have his father's respect and his money. Good enough to build a life that doesn't need his approval, in a state where his name means nothing, doing work that makes me proud every single day. Richard Sullivan tried to buy me off with $100,000. His own father bought him out with $250,000. The math works out in my favor. But the real victory isn't financial. It's watching Garrett sleep peacefully for the first time since I've known him, unburdened by a father who never deserved his devotion. It's building a home where our future children will never have to earn their grandfather's love based on net worth. It's knowing that the man who called me worthless is now the one with nothing left to leverage. Sometimes I think about that restaurant, the white tablecloths, the hushed conversations, the absolute certainty on Richard's face when he slid that check across. He thought he knew how the story ended. He was wrong. The story ended with his son walking away, his father writing a bigger check, and me framing his bribery attempt like a trophy. He spent 3 years trying to prove I wasn't worth keeping. All he proved was that he wasn't worth knowing. He said I wasn't good enough. I'm good enough to have his son's unwavering loyalty. I'm good enough to have his father's respect. I'm good enough to build a life that doesn't need his approval, in a state where his name means nothing, doing work that makes me proud. Richard Sullivan tried to buy me off with $100,000. His own father bought him out with $250,000. The math works out in my favor. But the real victory isn't financial. It's watching Garrett sleep peacefully for the first time since I've known him, unburdened by a father who never deserved his devotion. It's building a home where our future children will never have to earn their grandfather's love based on net worth. It's knowing that the man who called me worthless is now the one with nothing left to leverage. If someone's ever told you that you weren't good enough, this is for you. If someone's ever tried to put a price on your dignity, calculated your worth in dollars, and assumed you'd accept the number, this is for you. If you've ever watched someone choose you over the family that raised them, knowing what that costs, knowing what they're giving up, this is for you. Your value isn't set by people who've already decided to reject you. It's set by how you treat others, what you build, who you become when no one's watching. The people who try to buy you off are just announcing their own bankruptcy. Moral, emotional, fundamental. Let them keep their money. Take their consequences instead. Tell me in the comments, has anyone ever tried to put a price on your relationship? Offered money to make you disappear? I read every story. And if you want more stories about people who discovered their real worth by watching someone else underestimate them, subscribe. Sometimes the best revenge isn't cashing the check. It's framing it on your wall in the house their money couldn't buy.